You know that feeling when you see a system that's supposed to help people, think hospitals, schools, you name it, and it just seems to buckle under pressure, right when we need it most? It's frustrating. Well, today we're going to unpack a really powerful and kind of surprising reason why that happens. Let's get into it. So, here's the central mystery we're trying to solve. When something goes wrong in an organization, what's our first instinct? Right, we add more rules, more oversight, more checklists. It just feels like the logical thing to do. But what if adding all that extra control is actually the very thing that leads to more failure? It's a heck of a puzzle, and that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, let's start by looking at the crime scene, so to speak. When a system breaks down, where do our minds usually go? What are the usual suspects we line up?
And yeah, usually we point the finger at one of these four things. You've got corruption, you've got powerful interests capturing the system, you've got just plain old incompetence. Or maybe the public just doesn't trust the institution anymore. And look, a lot of the time, those explanations are spot on. But that's not our mystery. The real head scratcher, the thing we're focused on, is why good systems, filled with good people trying their best, still fall apart.
I mean, just think about it for a second. This is what's happening in hospitals where dedicated doctors feel forced to follow our rigid protocol to the letter just to avoid a lawsuit, even when their professional gut is screaming at them to do something different. Or think about airline pilots under intense pressure who might rely a little too much on the autopilot. These aren't bad people. It tells us that the problem isn't about their intentions. It's got to be something deeper, something structural, baked right into the mechanics of the system.
So if it's not the usual suspects, then what is going on here? What's the hidden culprit? Well, our investigation leads us to this really fascinating concept from the source material. It's called authority capacity.
Okay, so authority capacity. What on earth is that? It's not about who has the corner office or the fancy title. It's really about the system's actual ability to make a tough call when the pressure is on. To weigh all the messy, complicated options and make a real judgment call when the rule book doesn't give you a clear, easy answer. And it's super important to understand what this isn't. Power, for instance, is just your ability to force an outcome. Legitimacy is whether people accept your decision. But authority capacity, that's the crucial step before all that. It's the ability to actually decide what to do in the first place. Think about it. A system can have all the power and legitimacy in the world, but if it loses its capacity to make sound judgments, it just becomes a hollow shell, rigidly enforcing rules that might not even make sense anymore. Honestly, the best way to wrap your head around this is to think of it like a battery. First off, it's finite. There's only so much charge. Second, it's a stock, not a flow, which means it can drain super fast in a crisis, but it recharges agonizingly slow through things like trust and experience. And here's the absolute kicker. When that battery's empty, it's empty. You can't just try harder or be more decisive to get more judgment out of it. It's a real resource, and once it's gone, it is gone. All right, so we've got our concept, this battery of judgment. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how exactly it gets drained and what happens when the system completely runs out of juice. So here's the absolute core of the problem. Real human judgment is, well, it's slow. It needs time to breathe. It needs deliberation. It needs context. But the demands we put on our systems today, they are lightning fast. We're talking constant alerts, 24/7 news cycles, quarterly performance targets. This creates what the source material calls a rate mismatch. The demand for decisions is coming in at 100 miles an hour, while the system's ability to produce quality judgment is stuck in first gear. And this mismatch kicks off a totally predictable four-step collapse. It's like a chain reaction. First, the pressure ramps up. Time shrinks, scrutiny intensifies. Step 2. That authority capacity battery we talked about, it starts draining fast. That leads directly to step 3, where just making a discretionary judgment call becomes risky. It's a source of liability. So what happens? The system does the only logical thing it can in step 4. It finds a substitute, something faster, safer, and easier to defend. And this whole process leads us to a really powerful idea, a core principle here. It's called the substitution invariant. And it's actually pretty simple. When a system is under pressure, faster ways of doing things will always push out slower ones. It doesn't matter what your intentions are. So things like rigid checklists, performance metrics, and simple algorithms, they take over. And here's the critical part. They don't take over because they're better or smarter. They take over because they are faster and a whole lot easier to defend than a slow, nuanced human judgment call. Okay, but here's where the story takes a really dark turn. You might think, all right, so when the crisis is over, things will just go back to normal, right? Wrong. This isn't some temporary glitch. Once judgment gets replaced by these faster substitutes, getting it back is incredibly difficult. There's a name for this phenomenon: authority hysteresis. Now, that sounds super technical, but the idea behind it is simple. The system gets stuck. The best way to think of it is like a ratchet. You know, that tool that clicks one way but won't go back? Losing your capacity for judgment is the easy click forward. But trying to get it back? That requires a massive, coordinated effort and way better conditions than the ones that caused you to lose it in the first place. So why doesn't judgment just bounce back? Well, there are a few reasons the system stays stuck in this new rule-bound state. For one, the skills for making good judgment calls they wither away from not being used. People literally forget how. Then the whole definition of doing a good job changes. It's no longer about making a wise decision, it's about checking the boxes and complying with the process. Then people start to internalize all this, preemptively following the rules without even thinking. And finally, everyone else, the public, the regulators, they get used to it. They start to expect and even demand the simplicity of metrics and checklists. The whole system just adapts to a new reality where real judgment doesn't exist anymore. I know, this all sounds pretty depressing, doesn't it? So if it's so hard to fix a system once it's broken, what's the answer? How do you stop it from collapsing in the first place? Well, the solution isn't what you might think. It's not about adding more control. It's about designing a better architecture. And here is the big idea, the key takeaway from all this. The solution isn't writing better rules. The solution is insulation. What we need to do is build structural buffers, like shock absorbers for a car, that are designed to protect that slow, careful human process of judgment from all the frantic, immediate pressure of the outside world. The goal isn't to control the decision, it's to control the rate at which pressure hits the decision maker. And this insulation generally comes in 3 flavors. First, you've got temporal insulation. That's pretty straightforward. It just means building in more time. Think of things like mandatory cooling-off periods before a big decision. Second, there's procedural insulation. This is about creating a structured process, like having different stages or thresholds a decision has to pass through. And finally, there's fiscal insulation. This is all about having stable, long-term resources and funding so that you can absorb shocks and uncertainty, and you're not constantly operating in a state of panic. So when you pull it all together, the big lesson here is that maybe we should spend a little less time trying to fix the people inside a system and a lot more time fixing the architecture of the system itself. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. I want you to look around at your own world, your job, your team, even your community, and ask yourself, is it truly designed to protect and nurture that fragile, essential act of human judgment? Or is it, maybe with the very best of intentions, actually designed to replace it?